Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is our great honor and pleasure to present the first WT-FISU University Sports Peace Corps Forum. This is Rosan from UC Berkeley. I am serving as the coordinator of World University Sports Peace Corps. This splendid idea was inspired by both WT President Dr. Chung-Won Cho and FISU President Oleg Matishin during the Napoli Summer Universiade in 2019. To utilize university sports as a main vehicle to promote world peace and harmony. As a part of the shared vision of WT and FISU to promote world peace through sports. Both organizations signed MOU in Turin, Italy on November 15, 2019, on the occasion of FISU Gala Dinner. WT and FISU are committed to creating a University Sports Peace Corps, which will cultivate future leaders through various sporting, training, and education programs. The University Sports Peace Corps will provide hopes for deserving and underserved and underprivileged young people. As the first step, WT and FISU propose to jointly organize an online University Sports Peace Corps Forum to increase awareness of the importance of sports in bringing peace to society and promoting values of humanity, social justice, and gender equality to young people. Due to severe health crises like COVID, our day-to-day lifestyle and activities have been either discontinued or limited. International sports federations like FISU and WT ended up cancel or postpone the major events due to this crisis. Furthermore, COVID pandemic caused various problems and challenges such as social justice crisis, inequality, and crisis in humanity. Therefore, we are trying to seek positive solutions and proactive suggestions to improve the current difficulties by utilizing university sports as a main vehicle to bring people together and cultivate world peace and harmony. Therefore, this forum is titled WT-FISU University Sports Peace Forum, and it has a sub-theme of humanity, social justice, gender equality. As the World University Sports Peace Corps coordinator, I greatly appreciate both WT and FISU presidents' inspiring visions and collaborations. Moreover, I'm also grateful for main speakers who will share their professional knowledge and valuable experience through this forum. More importantly, I deeply appreciate friends from both WT and FISU office staff who diligently work together to bring this event possible. Again, thank you so much for your help and hard work in putting this great event, educational events together. Thank you very much. First of all, we would like to share a video clip from World Taekwondo.
Get active with PJ Masks and the World Taekwondo.
Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce President of World Taekwondo, Dr. Chung-Won Cho. Dr. Cho has been serving as the President of World Taekwondo since 2004 and has served as a board member of Olympic Refugee Foundation, Chair of Taekwondo Humanitarian Foundation, and President of GSC International, and Chairman of World Taekwondo Peace Corps Foundation, and the President of Korean Fair Play Committee. Dr. Cho initiated this wonderful idea of developing the World University Peace Corps with Vice President Oleg. Please welcome President of World Taekwondo, Dr. Cho.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the University Sport and Peace Forum jointly organized by World Taekwondo and the International University Sports Federation. I'm very happy to open the University Sport and Peace Forum today. When we signed a Memorandum of Understanding in December 2019 to promote peace and physical activity through sport, we did not expect to face a world challenged by the global COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, this forum could not have come at a better time. As the world finds ways to overcome the pandemic, this forum is a reminder that the global citizens have a shared responsibility to live in harmony and support each other. Sport and society are interdependent on each other. FISU and the World Taekwondo continue to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals and global targets, such as the Olympic Agenda 2020. Over the years, World Taekwondo has contributed immensely on humanitarian activities, social development, capacity building of our member nations, and on advancing gender equality. I'm a firm believer that sport can be used to promote world peace. This is the power of sport. Sport is and will always be an important enabler of sustainable development. Through this forum and many more projects between World Taekwondo and FISU, we hope to promote core values such as inclusiveness, tolerance, leadership, respect, teamwork, excellence, and integrity. We should always strive for constant innovation to stay relevant and remember the joy of sport and its benefits. Today, I would like to thank the speakers, Mr. Claude Marshall from UNHCR and the Taekwondo Humanitarian Foundation, and Ms. Delis O'Malley and Ms. Rosaura Mendez Gamboa from FISU for sharing your expert opinions on humanity, social justice, and gender equality. I would also like to take this opportunity to extend my warmest thanks to FISU President Oleg Matheson. Since the first time when we met to discuss about possible cooperation between FISU and World Taekwondo, President Matheson has been a great supporter and, of course, friend. Today, the vision that we shared has become a reality. In this regard, I would like to thank FISU Acting President Leons Eder, Secretary General Eric Saint-Laurent, and Professor Rachel Ahn for your active support in making the University Sport and Peace Forum a reality. Thank you, and I wish every participant a fulfilling University Sport and Peace Forum.
Thank you, Dr. Cho, for inspiring messages. Now, it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce FISU's acting president, Eder Leons. President Eder has served as various key roles in FISU, such as first vice president, assessor, and the chairman of the Summer University Supervision Committee. Acting President Eder also served in various leadership roles in European University Sports Association, such as executive member, treasurer, and the president of the Swiss University Sports Federation. Please welcome Acting President of FISU, Eder Leons.
Dear World Taekwondo President Chung Won-tu, dear speakers, dear participants from the Taekwondo and University sports community, dear friends. The event that gathers us today, the FISU World Taekwondo University Sports and Peace Forum, is the result of a long-lasting cooperation between our respective organizations. For years now, Taekwondo has been one of the most popular sports within FISU, not only because of the excellent performances of the athletes who compete, but also thanks to a shared vision. Indeed, World Taekwondo and the International University Sports Federation share common values, which you will see highlighted today thanks to the exceptional lineup of speakers present here for this event. Let me take this opportunity to go back to the genesis of this project, born from the vision of Oleg Matheson and President Chu, who wished to put forward the role of sport as a social driver for positive change in our modern societies. Today, you will hear from top members of both the World Taekwondo and the International University Sports Federation communities, who will showcase how sport can contribute to social justice, humanity, and gender equality. And I am certain that all of you will join me in encouraging the world of sport to continue the efforts in those respective fields. What better than sport can inspire the young generations to work together towards a better society? What more can be done through sport to make our world a better place to live for the current and future generations? Those are the questions that I am sure we will be able to shed some light on today. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, in our current times of pandemic, it is obvious that we all want to be able to meet in person again and share not only knowledge and ideas, but also good moments together. I am confident that soon enough we will be able to do so at academic and sport events. I trust that this forum will contribute to developing the existing partnership between the two organizations, but also to initiate new efforts from all the participants in the fields that will be addressed today. Before concluding this message, let me thank again President Chu and his team for their continuous efforts in ensuring the full support of World Taekwondo to FISU, but also to the speakers that you will hear from today. Mr. Claude Marshall, THF board member, and my FISU Executive Committee colleagues Rosaura Mendes Gamboa and Elise O'Malley are all experts in their respective fields, and I am looking forward to hearing their message. I would also like to thank the FISU Education Committee and Department in charge of this event for always promoting sport not only as a competition, but also with educational aspects. Together with Russell Ahn, the FISU Technical Committee Chair for Taekwondo, and a long-lasting member of World Taekwondo's Taekwondo for All Committee, they have worked on today's event, and I am certain that the quality content you will hear today will help us to reflect on how we can all play our part through sport for a better society. Dear friends, I wish you all an excellent webinar and hope to be able to meet in person soon at one of our FISU events coming up in the next months. Thank you.
Thank you, President Lian. I greatly appreciate both WT and FISU President's inspiring messages of world peace through university sports. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our first main speaker, Mr. Claude Marshall. Mr. Marshall is a board member of World Taekwondo Humanitarian Foundation and Refugee Sports Coordinator of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Mr. Marshall joined UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency in Geneva in 1993. He came to UNHCR as a voluntary consultant and was quickly responsible for building sports program for refugee youth, mainly in asylum and camps and settlement in developing countries. He studied the working relationship with various sports federations, as well as the International Olympic Committee. Please welcome Mr. Marshall.
Thank you very much. And I would say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to my friends and colleagues around the world. As you heard, my name is Claude Marshall, and I am speaking from Geneva, Switzerland, where it is a rainy early afternoon. But from what I have heard so far, the sun is shining on your topic. So we're going to do something that is good. So in the very short time that I've got today, I would like to tell you what we're going to cover. First of all, what is a refugee? It is not so difficult to explain. What the United Nations High Commissioner, UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency does. It will be abbreviated, of course, and the value of sport for refugee youth is not unlike the value of sport for all youth, but almost more easily to say more important. And what can a university student do that's interested in sport what can a student do to help? Now, who are the refugees we try to serve? They are people who have lost nearly everything to violence and war. They flee to where they hope there is safety, and they cross a border of a country in search of that safety. Now, why did they flee? They fled because someone in power wanted the ground that they lived in. Or better yet, they wanted what was under the ground in some occasions. They were the wrong religion to the people in power, the wrong political persuasion to the people in power. And all these people that you have just seen, you have to remember one very important thing. If they didn't flee, they probably would be dead or badly hurt. They had to flee to save their lives and their children's lives. The UNHCR receives them in a neighboring country where they have fled. The country gives the UNHCR the land, we set up a camp, and the people come. And then they struggle to make a life in exile. And with various sondage questions that we have asked the refugees over the last decades, those who have fled, we say, what concerns you most? And it is always their children's future. So, in a mayhem like this, you see where the children are coming off a boat that crossed the Mediterranean. A boat is too grand to say. By the way, you know how many lose their lives on that treacherous crossing, which in some places is no more than 8-10 kilometers. In the mayhem of the flight during violence of war, children are separated from their parents too often. Separated, or the parents were killed. I know some terrible stories in my work in the last 25 years with UNHCR, where children have fled alone, who were probably not more than 8 to 10 years old. Now, most of you can remember your age at 8 to 10, or you may have children or sisters and brothers who are that young. Can you imagine leaving, not knowing whether your parents are alive or dead, and running from danger at that age? And I can tell you a wonderful story with a woman who is a judo expert in the world. In the Congo, she fled a local civil war, which was dreadful. And she ended up at 10 years old, walking for 4 days, living off the land. And my goodness, who knows what is going to happen to a female child that young, or any child for that matter. Well, she got to the camp and someone said to her, join a group that is learning judo. And of course, she said, what is judo? And it didn't take many years before, when talking to us, she said, sport saved my life. I'd like to show you in a moment a film that will give you an idea of beginning to end of fleeing to great success. It's not the norm, but the fleeing and the reception and sport is the norm. Go ahead. Can you turn on the sound? Okay, thanks very much, Jed. What you saw there is almost a true story. It's a depiction. I'm sorry the sound was not there, at least it didn't reach me in Geneva. Maybe it's the rain outside. You saw a young fellow who had to flee, who was shot at and fled alone, reached a camp, got into a sports program where he learned to run well and made it to a refugee Olympic team. We had the first one in Rio in 2016, and this year we hope there will be an Olympics. We think there will, and there will be an Olympic refugee team also in Tokyo, where it's not announced yet. We have 55 candidates, and I hope we have 20 in Tokyo who will be making up a team. And I think it looks like we probably will have 2 Taekwondo athletes competing against the world's best in Tokyo. Now, the UN Refugee Agency was created in 1951 to take care of displaced persons. And they were in camps in Germany. That was 6 years after the Second World War. There were still a lot of people in camps, and it was part of our mandate to help them. We had something like, I understand, I wasn't there then. Well, I was around on this earth, but not there. There were about 30 people who were trying to help bring these people to countries where they could live. And so life went on, but the fact of helping refugees goes back a long, long time. If we go back to the year I think it's 450 BC, that's around 2,700 years ago, Euripides, the historian, the playwright, said something that is of importance today. There is no greater sorrow on this earth than the loss of one's native land. And that is true. Here you see a group of Rohingya refugees heading to Bangladesh, a long walk. Now, let me give you a little bit of a background on myself. As you have heard, I am with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. I was born a lot of years ago in 1932. I was born in Germany. My family fled the Hitler regime in 1936. And we ended up in the United States, where I was educated. As some of you know accents in English, you can tell I'm American. And I went through my education in the United States, universities, and finally went to work for an advertising agency in New York, where in 1990, no, yes, 1964, my company sent me to Geneva. I had a German wife. I speak German. I remember my boss saying, well, you're going to Geneva, but doesn't make any difference. And I said, his name was Harold. I said, Harold, they speak French in Geneva. And he says, oh, German, French, that doesn't make any difference. So I think that's an American point of view. Not always correct, is it? At any rate, I worked there until 1993, and then I had a early retirement, a good one, and I said, I am going to retire, but I want to do something. And I had met the High Commissioner for Refugees, Madame Ogata. I had met her socially, and the second time I met her, I said, I'm leaving. Do you have a job for me? And she asked again, what do I do? And I told her, and she said, perfect, we have a place for you in private sector fundraising. You know, most of the money that we need at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees comes from governments, and we need to increase the private sector's share of the costs of running UNHCR. Well, I started that. And then when I was looking for projects at the regional desks in Geneva, I found them. And the people in charge of the regions, Africa, Asia, the Americas, they all said, why don't you get us some money for sport? And I said, well, get you money for sport? Why do you need money for sport? Isn't that natural? They said, yes, it's natural for many people, but not for refugees. We had no funding for sports, and the money we had was used for life-saving type of activities for the refugees. And the sport was not, although important, was not considered a life-saving activity. So I said, okay, I'm going to look around for money with sport federations. At the time, I did not know the Taekwondo Federation. That blessing only came in 2014, right, Dr. Chu? At any rate, I looked around, and then I also was introduced to the Olympic Committee, who said, yes, we will help you. And we decided on a location in Africa, in Kenya, called Kakuma with them. And we put in there basketball, football, and volleyball for boys of various ages. Now, the Olympic Committee people that I knew wanted to come and look at the success or no success. It was successful. they wanted to look at the success of the project, and we went to Kakuma in Kenya. We were very proud of ourselves until a young lady tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Mr. Marshall, Miss Gladys would like to see you." And I said, "Well, who is Miss Gladys?" "Oh, Miss Gladys runs the teenage young ladies groups in the camp." And I said, "Well, let's go." So I went in there, and Miss Gladys was in a hut a little bit larger than a round table, where there were 10 teenage girls sitting around crocheting and knitting and sewing. And I said, I'm welcomed here. I see that. Thank you for asking me." And Miss Gladys said, "Mr. Marshall, what do you hair?" Now, I knew that leading question was going to get me into trouble, but I answered dutifully. And I said, "Well, I don't hair anything other than the clicking of knitting needles." She said, "Do you hear the girls talking to each other?" I said, "No, they don't seem to talk to each other." "Well, let me tell you, you, in your wisdom," not just me, you being a big plural of the agency, said, "You send to these young women knitting, sewing, and crocheting. These girls arrived 3 months ago to a few weeks ago. And while they are doing this knitting, sewing, and crocheting, they are thinking of the hell that they have witnessed to get to the camp. And they don't talk." And she said, "You must bring them sports." I said, "I'm convinced." And that was it. We brought them sports. Now, I have to tell you, I'm glad that happened early in my career, because what we learned from that goes through my entire work at UNHCR. You can put on the next one. That's it. Okay. One of the things, sports restores a lost childhood to all children, regardless of gender. Playing sports, said one kid to me, and I've heard this in many ways, playing sports makes me feel like everyone else. It gives me a place to fit in and feel like I'm part of something. It gives me a home. Lesson number 3, sport gives a young person stability, a sense of belonging and hope where there was none. And I learned this in 25 years. Refugee children are ordinary children coping with extraordinary circumstances. Let me move on to the next slide. I want you to have a look at some of the sports we do. This one, you know, of course, Taekwondo. Taekwondo is by all means a perfect sport for refugee children. It teaches them a discipline they've lost in their flight, in the mayhem that they lived in. It also teaches them a discipline, a courtesy, and it teaches them that their opponent is just an opponent in name. The opponent is still a friend, and the courtesy of the sport teaches you how to use the sport to make friends, and that they do. And then there is one more thing that people forget. In the mayhem, the unrest that has made these children refugees, they have lost their trust in adults. And we have seen that a good sports teacher, a good coach, brings it all back to where it should belong. So that's important. I mentioned the Olympic team that comes out of our sports program. I want to mention one more thing. Girls' education is extremely important for the young women and the young girls. And Mrs. Ogata, the first High Commissioner that I knew, used to say that if you can get a girl in school and give her even an elementary education, that girl will become a woman, and that woman will become a mother, and that mother who has an education will teach her children the value of peace. And that educated woman, no matter to what level, can help bring peace to a world. Now, what happens in a refugee camp? It looks neat. It is neat. They're kept clean, but it's not a very great life. Now, if I could have the next slide, please, Jeff. Yeah. Now, almost all refugees, if you if you had a questionnaire and you asked people to be honest, what do you want most, other than they want their children to be safe and grow up with a future, they all want to go home. However, they can't go home because there's a danger. And refugees cannot be forced to go home. Once they have been admitted into a country as a refugee, there is an international convention made in the early 1950s that says to all the signatory countries, and that's practically all of them in this world, you cannot force a refugee who does not want to go home. You cannot force a refugee to go home. And they won't go home unless there is no longer a danger. So unfortunately, they have to stay where they are for years. There's a possibility, as another avenue of change, they can be absorbed in the population of a country where they're in a camp. This has happened quite often in Kenya. And lastly, a number of countries in the world will resettle these refugees and bring them into their country as immigrants, and they become part of that country's population. And that has been too few in the recent years. There have been 3 major countries over the years that have resettled refugees. That has been Canada, Australia, and the United States. And it looks like the United States is returning to its normal level of taking in more refugees and bringing them in as migrants. Now, let me quickly give you a statistical overview with a video that to turn on in a second. I will confuse you with numbers, we like to talk about the number of forcibly displaced people in the world. There are about 80 million forcibly displaced. Of that 80 million, 28 million are refugees and 35 million are internally displaced. Internally displaced is like a refugee, but the person has not crossed the border. But UNHCR has a mandate to try to help these people as well. Okay, Jed, go ahead. They have 79.5 million stories, 79 million dreams, 79.5 million lives uprooted, 79.5 million uncertain futures, 79 million children, mothers, fathers, people like you and me. And that is the story of the refugee kids. Now, what can you do at the university? You can help build a refugee awareness with NGOs operating in your communities. We work with 1,700 NGOs in the world. We can't do our work if we didn't have the NGOs. So thankfully, probably near you someplace, my dear college, university people, there is an NGO that does something on behalf of refugees. So build an awareness about what the refugee population who have been admitted to your country are doing. And if you are in a club or group that where it fits, one of the best things you could do is to ask a refugee that is in asylum to take a part in the activity that you're running. Advocacy that you should learn, and I hope you do, their efforts to spread the word will make an enormous difference. Governments in our democratic world listen to their population. You can go to the website, which is easy to find, www.unhcr.org. Get involved, and they might have some suggestions for you, and you can follow UNHCR on the social media. And now I think ultimately, I would also like to close by saying, we know this is true. Ultimately, sport has helped many of the refugees you've seen in these images and videos. It provides, if I could put it in a nutshell, sport provides a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and a hope for the future. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. And I think it's back to sunny California.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for Mr. Marshall for sharing such inspiring and touching stories. Okay, I would like to introduce our next main speaker, Dr. Rosaura Mendez. Dr. Mendez has a PhD in physical culture and sports, and she has been working as a professor of Costa Rica College of Technology for more than 30 years. Professor Rosaura is serving as an executive committee member of FISU and chair of the Gender Equality Committee. She's also serving as a vice president of Costa Rica University Sports Federation and the director of the FISU Forum in Costa Rica in 2022. Please note that there's a simultaneous interpretation is available under interpretation button on your screen underneath for both English and Spanish. Again, please welcome Dr. Mendes.
Uh-oh.
I am so sorry. We have a little bit of technical challenge. So can we take a 1 minute break?
Sorry, for the speakers, could you please just click the share the sounds button when you share the PowerPoint screen? Because on the bottom there is a tick box for sound sharing. So please just, Rosara, please just close your PowerPoint. Can you please say something for sound check? Oh, we cannot hear you.
Hola.
I can hear you now, Rosario.
All right, very good.
Ok,
Ahora le
thank you.
podemos escuchar.
Ajá. Muchas gracias, queridos amigos.
Thank you, dear friends.
Me he sentido muy complacida en escuchar al doctor Marshall el día de hoy y muy comprometida con su proyecto. Eso es muy importante y vamos a tomarlo muy en cuenta para trabajar de la mano, Mr. Marshall. Reciban un saludo cordial desde Costa Rica en nombre del Comité de Igualdad de Género de la FISU. Deseo agradecer a la organización de este importante webinar gracias a la coordinación de FISU y a la World Taekwondo, con el objetivo de dialogar temas tan importantes en momentos tan difíciles, en momentos para brindar esas oportunidades reales a las mujeres en el deporte universitario. Esperamos que con la colaboración de todas las organizaciones, especialmente las nacionales y las federaciones internacionales, podamos en los próximos años obtener números del 50% de hombres y 50% de mujeres en esta participación. Quisiera también destacar un programa que hace la diferencia en nuestra organización. Este programa es liderado por nuestro presidente activo en este momento, el señor Leon Eder, desde el Comité de Desarrollo. Este programa denominado Ayuda Financiera se fue creado para la Universidad de Sheffield en el año 1991 y se ha mantenido y se ha fortalecido durante 15 ediciones para los Juegos Mundiales de Verano. ¿En qué consiste este programa? En la asignación de 3 becas totales de participación para los Juegos Mundiales Universitarios. 3 becas totales, becamos a 3 personas de países con un Producto Interno Bruto per cápita de $3.500, en donde se le cubren los gastos totales de participación a 2 atletas, un hombre y una mujer, y un delegado en los Juegos Mundiales Universitarios, nuestro máximo evento deportivo universitario. Este aporte que da nuestra organización a las federaciones nacionales garantiza la participación de al menos una mujer por delegación, por país, en nuestro máximo evento deportivo mundial universitario. Es importante destacar que durante estos últimos años, este programa ha beneficiado a más de 3.000 estudiantes atletas de organizaciones deportivas universitarias nacionales, que representan a los países menos privilegiados del movimiento deportivo universitario. Es importante destacar que de estos atletas se han logrado obtener podios y ganar medallas para sus países. Asimismo, quisiera comentarles sobre el Comité de Igualdad de Género. El Comité de Igualdad de Género inició en el año 2007 con la creación de la Comisión de Mujeres y Deporte de la FISU. Un grupo de mujeres visionarias apoyadas del Comité Ejecutivo lograron establecer este primer comité ad hoc. Gracias al apoyo y a la visión con perspectiva de género de nuestra organización, en el 2013, en la Asamblea de Kazán en Rusia, el comité pasó a ser un comité permanente y convertirse en el Comité de Igualdad de Género, reconocido por nuestra organización oficialmente con un programa, con nuestros estatutos, nuestros lineamientos, nuestros objetivos, en donde tenemos en este momento 13 comités y el Comité de Igualdad de Género logra convertirse en un comité oficial. Nuestro comité tiene sus funciones establecidas de acuerdo a los estatutos, que asesora al Comité Ejecutivo sobre políticas adecuadas para fomentar y apoyar a las mujeres en todos los niveles. Esto con la tarea principal de aplicar el principio de igualdad de oportunidades entre hombres y mujeres y así representar plenamente los valores del deporte universitario. Contamos con 2 equipos de trabajo. El Comité de Igualdad de Género está integrado por representantes de diferentes países. Yo lo presido en mi calidad de miembro del Comité Ejecutivo, soy la presidenta. Tenemos la representación de Gran Bretaña con Adam Pratchett, que es el vicepresidente, una representante de China, Wei Sun, un representante de Ruanda y una representante de Corea. 3 mujeres y 2 hombres constituimos este comité. Nos apoyan 5 especialistas, líderes del movimiento deportivo mundial universitario, con el objetivo de apoyar todas nuestras acciones. Tenemos a Michelle Tamer de Irlanda, a Karen Morrison de Estados Unidos, a Ilan Kowalski de Israel y a Agnes Ansip de Hungría, así como a Carpo de Benín. Juntos construimos las propuestas que presentamos al Comité Ejecutivo y desarrollamos durante estos 4 años. También FISU se ha destacado por considerar la participación de las mujeres con igualdad de oportunidades en todos los eventos. Destaco desde los Juegos Mundiales Universitarios, los Campeonatos Mundiales Universitarios, las Copas Mundiales Universitarias, todas las actividades que se organizan, las planteamos y procuramos que tengan esa perspectiva de género, planeando las participaciones con igualdad en los escenarios deportivos y con igualdad, por supuesto, de oportunidades para todos. En cuanto, también FISU desarrolla las mismas oportunidades en su academia de voluntariado, en donde procuramos que los hombres y mujeres participen en igualdad de oportunidades, con igualdad de participación en la Conferencia Mundial del Deporte Universitario que se desarrolla en el marco de los Juegos Mundiales Universitarios. Planteamos y se desarrollan los temas de igualdad de género, se discuten con profesionales de diferentes universidades, diferentes organizaciones, siempre está incluido el tema de igualdad de género, al igual que en el foro FISU, el foro FISU de forma permanente, evento que se desarrolla cada 2 años. Hemos desarrollado una sinergia importante con el Comité de Igualdad de Género. Este comité nos brinda al Comité de Educación, brinda al Comité de Igualdad de Género espacios en todos estos eventos que ya los mencioné, con la finalidad de que incluyamos nuestra temática. Esto hace un valioso soporte, ya que ofrece la oportunidad de visualizar, divulgar nuestro quehacer como comité, así como brindar capacitación, educación y tan necesaria para involucrar a todas las personas que trabajamos en el movimiento deportivo universitario. Invitamos a las organizaciones nacionales a que se incorporen, por ejemplo, en estos eventos académicos, de que incorporen en las participaciones al menos un hombre y una mujer, tanto oficiales como estudiantes. Y ya desde el 2010 en Vigo, en el Foro Mundial Universitario, incorporamos de forma permanente el tema de igualdad de género. Y como política del foro también seleccionamos a los dos estudiantes más activos, mejores estudiantes que participen en el foro, un hombre y una mujer, para que representen y participen en la siguiente conferencia FISU, que se realiza en los Juegos Mundiales del siguiente año. También en FISU tenemos políticas de comunicación inclusiva en los medios de comunicación. Esto significa que realizamos la misma cobertura y difusión informativa de los eventos para ambos géneros. Además, utilizamos un lenguaje inclusivo, tanto textual como la incorporación de imágenes fotográficas y audiovisuales de mujeres y hombres. Esto en todas las publicaciones impresas y digitales. Desde las actividades que desarrollamos en el Comité de Igualdad de Género, estas son algunas de las actividades más importantes que desarrollamos en este momento. Las mesas de igualdad de género, las mesas redondas de igualdad de género. También tenemos un premio de igualdad de género. Participamos en eventos internacionales, conferencias, seminarios, transmitiendo nuestro quehacer y trabajando de la mano con otras organizaciones para construir la tan anhelada paridad de género en nuestras organizaciones. Y también seguimos aportando y construyendo y participando con temas en las actividades académicas. En cuanto a la mesa redonda de igualdad de género de FISU, que se desarrolla en el marco de los Juegos Mundiales Universitarios, la consideramos como un proyecto de los prioritarios, ya que nos permite conocer las particularidades de las organizaciones continentales y nacionales, con la finalidad de plantear estrategias conjuntas. El objetivo es que las mujeres y los hombres participantes puedan compartir experiencias, avances, generar empatía y crear alianzas. La mesa redonda durante los Juegos Mundiales de Verano e Invierno se organiza en la Villa de los Atletas y está abierta para todos los participantes de los Juegos y se invita a la comunidad nacional en donde se desarrollan los Juegos a participar. Sobre el premio de igualdad de género que viene desarrollándose desde el 2009 y que pueden observar cómo se han distribuido en los diferentes continentes, se considera o contribuye más bien al proceso de toma de decisiones a nivel político y alienta a las organizaciones continentales a desarrollar, continentales y nacionales, a organizar iniciativas centradas en la igualdad de género. Este premio consiste en la atribución de un monto para que el proyecto que en ese momento se está desarrollando pueda continuar fortaleciéndose y impactar de una forma positiva, no solamente en el lugar de ubicación del proyecto, sino expandirse de una manera más ágil y con algunos recursos que se le asigna. Este se otorga cada 2 años a una federación, a una organización, a un proyecto existente en proceso de desarrollo. Y para este año, para el 2021, hemos incluido en este premio que está en este momento abierto y que cierra a finales del mes de mayo, e invitamos a todos ustedes a participar y presentar sus proyectos. Tenemos una novedad o una fortaleza en que no solamente tenemos el premio que se ha desarrollado, que se ha promocionado durante los últimos años, durante las últimas 7 ediciones, sino que estamos incluyendo el premio FISU Gender Equality Champion Award. Esto significa que podemos plantear la propuesta de un premio, de un proyecto que se desarrolle en su organización, en su país, en su universidad. Esto tienen que pasarlo a la Federación Nacional de su país universitario y esta la eleva a FISU. Luego tenemos el premio del Champion, el campeón, que es también que ustedes pueden nominar a una persona que haya destacado en el tema de igualdad de género o que haya desarrollado, que haya liderado acciones importantes en esta temática, la pueden nominar y a nuestra organización para pues que sea evaluada y en el mes de, en la próxima Asamblea General estaríamos dando los nombres de estos premios y de estas personas que van a ser homenajeadas por nuestra organización. En el 2013, producto del trabajo que desarrollamos con diferentes organizaciones y federaciones, como la actividad esta que desarrollamos hoy, en ese 2013 firmamos la Declaración de Brighton y a partir de ese momento también desarrollamos una estrategia, un trabajo conjunto con la organización IWG. Trabajamos de la mano y participamos de manera recíproca en las actividades que ambas organizaciones desarrollamos. Un tema que nos tiene emocionados y como lo mencionó el profesor Ambrosel, en el 2022 desarrollaremos en Costa Rica el Foro Mundial de FISU, que tiene como tema el deporte universitario como motor de desarrollo sostenible. También tenemos, como lo estipula el foro, 4 subtemas y uno de esos es la igualdad de género. En este evento de 5 días que se realizará en el mes de abril del 2022 en Costa Rica, tendremos la oportunidad de compartir con representantes de organizaciones nacionales, de federaciones internacionales, el tema de igualdad de género en el deporte universitario y más allá. Así que les invitamos a todos ustedes a guardar en sus agendas la posibilidad y de acompañarnos a no solamente discutir sobre el tema de igualdad de género, sino sobre calidad de vida, educación de calidad y de reducción de inequalidades, temas tan importantes para lograr paz en el deporte. De igual manera, nuestra organización ha trabajado de la mano con la World Taekwondo y la FISU por muchos años. No dudaremos que seguiremos realizando acciones y proyectos conjuntos como el que hoy nos reúne, específicamente para poder dar la oportunidad a las mujeres de empoderarse y promover de una manera más efectiva su participación e incorporación en todos los diferentes ámbitos y niveles del deporte universitario. Muchas gracias y quedo atenta a sus preguntas.
Thank you, Professor Mendez. I must say we had a little bit of technical challenges. I appreciate your patience and understand all the audience. And Professor Rosarov, if you could prepare some sort of a summary of your presentation during the panel discussion, I think it'll be beneficial for our audience. Thank you very much. Now, I already introduced Professor Delisa Mili. Professor Mili, are you ready to?
I am ready. Can you hear me?
You. Yes.
Okay, great. I will go ahead and share my screen. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon again, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much, Dr. An. Very grateful for the opportunity to speak on this topic. And I congratulate the World Taekwondo Association and FISU for shining a light on these issues, especially during these times. Now, we know that sport plays a significant role in our global culture, and it has very broad appeal at all levels of society. Sport creates an environment where people are willing to engage with each other despite perceived differences. Nations at war will compete against each other in sport. Language barriers disappear within the common context of sport. And this unity and common purpose opens the door for greater understanding and appreciation of the challenges that others may face, and it unites us in our approach to positive solutions. Those of us, like myself, who have been involved in university sport for so many years, understand the very unique role that university sport plays in the connection between sports and academia, and in the critical development of tomorrow's leaders. So today I'm going to talk about the social justice movement we have seen in sport and how athletes are engaging at the university level and what universities and sport organizations can do to be a part of this movement and to support these efforts. First, let me say that we are all approaching these issues with very different lenses, based in part on our own national laws and our own social and cultural mores. There isn't just one single solution or approach. However, as educators, we are part of this movement. And with the platform of sport, our actions or our inactions will be very visible. The term social justice was first introduced as an economic concept as far back as the mid-1800s. Today's grassroots movement for social justice focuses around social mobility, the creation of safety nets, and economic justice. This concept of social justice often refers to human rights, and it's centered around improving the lives of historically marginalized groups. Now, while systemic social change generally falls to government and regulatory agencies who are responsible for shaping policy, social activism has always been a large part of the push towards social justice. And sport organizations with goals and values around social responsibility can and do play a role in social activism. Social activism involves highlighting those injustices and working to break down those structures or those systems that allow those injustices to continue. The work of social justice activists and organizations like the Institute for Sport and Social Justice include education, raising awareness, empowering individuals, giving voice to the voiceless, and encouraging civic participation. Here in the United States, we have seen somewhat of a transformation over the past 12 months, possibly a tipping point around race and culture. The very visible and tragic death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police last summer shook our nation to its core, and it prompted an unprecedented national outcry. In the months that followed, amidst this social vacuum that was created by the pandemic, sport emerged as a prominent voice for change. What we saw last summer was a collective and a unified movement by a large sector of the entire sport enterprise that placed issues of racial oppression and inequality in the center of American consciousness. Now, the power of sport has historically been seen through the impact and the influence of athletes at all levels of the game, from John Carlos and Tommy Smith's Olympic podium protests against racial injustice to Arthur Ashe and his fight against apartheid in South Africa, and Billie Jean King's push for equal pay for women. Many athletes have spoken out in support of a cause or in opposition to injustice. In early 2018, NBA superstar Lebron James was publicly reprimanded by a television journalist who suggested that he should keep his opinions to himself, keep his political commentary to himself, and essentially shut up and dribble. Well, James had 41 million Twitter followers and 36 million Instagram followers at the time. And he responded with an Instagram post entitled, "I am more than an athlete," and a statement that generated the hashtag, "We will not shut up and dribble." Now, if you take it into the university structure, we know that discussion and debate on social issues have always existed, and conversation around these issues are a very important part of the educational process. As universities seek to cultivate a learning environment to prepare students for lives and careers in a diverse world, they must also understand the inherent worth and dignity of every person and seek to promote an understanding of human diversity in all its dimensions. Throughout history, young people at the university level have been very strong and prominent as activists and catalysts for social change. In 1963, students at several universities in the southern states of the United States came together in protest against racial inequities that precluded African Americans and other people of color from sitting at a department lunch counter store to have a meal. Despite the aggression that you see in this picture, these young people continued to conduct these sit-ins, starting a movement in which more than 70,000 people participated and triggering the establishment of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a civil rights organization comprised solely of students and credited with several successful protest movements in the 1960s. In 1969, Black Student Alliance at the University of Wyoming planned a peaceful protest to raise awareness of religious restrictions on African Americans. These 14 African American football players approached their coach and they asked if they could wear black armbands during the game as a symbol of protest. All 14 players were kicked off the team, but the story was covered nationally, with many asking whether football was more important in the state of Wyoming than human rights. Well, today, we're seeing a significant increase in the impact and the influence of athletes at all levels of the game. Much of this is due to the high level of engagement and immediacy of social media. There is a growing recognition of the power of their voices and their ability to have a positive impact on society.
The roles the student athletes, I mean, we play are huge because, like you guys said, we have a platform, and then on top of that, when we're taking part in our sport, all eyes are on the players who are out there on the field, whether it's the hardwood. So when you're recognized on wherever the field or on the court, you're also recognized when you're seen around campus. So I think that's really big. So when someone sees me walking from building A to building B, they don't just think, oh, that's the basketball player. That's the basketball player who spoke out on the social injustice issues that are going around, and that's the basketball player who's well spoken.
I was doing kind of what I was always meant to do. Like, I know that sounds dramatic, but it really is so important to me because it's something that my dad has instilled within me since I was a younger kid, is standing up for what I think is right and kind of making sure that I'm using every ounce that I can to do that for sure.
I realized that a lot of my friends had never had like conversations regarding race or inequality or what oppression looks like, and so I kind of took it upon myself to like teach and educate others. And so I wanted to share kind of what I experienced going through life like as a Black male.
Each day something's happening. There's so many microaggressions, there's so many different acts of racism just on a daily basis, and you can get by just not noticing any of it. But when you're actively seeking to see it or hear it, you'll start to realize how often it does happen.
If you want me to do well on the volleyball court, you should also like support who I am off the court. And so that's kind of where sports goes hand in hand with like having this platform of like showing that you can do more than shoot a basketball, you know, serve an ace, throw a football. It's like I am more than my sport.
With numbers come like power, in the sense of if you want change to happen, the more people you have, the more likely it will happen. And so kind of using the numbers, using their platform to push, to provide, to educate.
The goal that I want to truly hone in on is just making sure that people who are not actively thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as other marginalized community movements, we want them to start actively thinking about it.
That instills hope in me because I know that people are understanding what's going on and they want to take action, whether, I mean, it's the wrong way or the correct way, people want to take action. So for me to see the initiative to take action is there in some people's hearts, that gives me hope that one day everything will be as it should. May not be tomorrow, may not be 2 years from now, may not be a million years from now, but one day I think this earth will be a place of just equality and love.
So one such protest movement which has gained global attention is the Black Lives Matter movement, which began as a hashtag created by 3 African-American women in 2013. Today, Black Lives Matter is a member-led global network of more than 40 chapters. And at its most basic level, Black Lives Matter is a call for people to recognize that the lives of people of color, not only in the United States, but around the world, should be valued. In August of 2020, the NCAA conducted a study that examined student athletes' perceptions and experiences in terms of civic engagement, athlete activism, and racial justice engagement. Almost 25,000 student athletes took this survey. Nearly 90% of student athletes surveyed indicated that they had had conversations on race or racial justice with family or friends over the past 6 months. 80% indicated that they had made an effort to learn more about these issues on their own. This video was created by the University of Kentucky basketball program, lending their voices to the racial protest movement.
The time for change is now.
We've watched for too long now, as our mothers, our fathers,
our brothers and our sisters
have been profiled,
undiscriminated, and even beaten, shot, and killed.
The victims of police brutality with no justice.
I am tired.
I am tired.
We are tired of watching the wrongful actions of a few
and the acceptance of systemic racism.
And we can no longer be quiet.
First of all, we want to express our condolences
to the victims and the families
of those who have been affected by police brutality,
social injustices,
and pervasive racism across the country.
George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery,
Rayshard Brooks,
Philando Castile,
Alton Sterling,
Eric Garner,
Trayvon Martin,
Michael Brown,
Jacob Blake,
Breonna Taylor,
and so many others.
We grieve with you.
We are angered with you.
And we as brothers,
black and whites,
are here to help to put an end to it.
To our fans, the Big Blue Nation, we ask you to join with us.
You cheer us on the court,
but we're asking you to support us off the court.
Be a part of the change.
To the leaders in our community,
our government officials, and our city and state police.
It's time for us to come together and make real change.
We want conversations. We want actions.
Because this can happen to any of us.
We have experienced racism.
We've experienced social injustice.
It's happened to me. It's happened to me.
And it's happened to me.
This is only the beginning.
We stand united together to make sure we move forward to a better tomorrow.
We ask you to join us.
Black Lives Matter.
One of the goals that is central to the realization of social justice is encouraging and supporting those who have less access to resources to be a part of civil society and the democratic process. So to this end, there have been attempts by athletes, teams, coaches throughout the year to provide the impetus for increased civic engagement. Several of those have taken the form of town halls or community conversations in which athletes, lawmakers, fans, and young people have been able to have these structured, solution-focused conversations and debates about the state of social justice issues in the nation. This next generation of athlete activists operating on social media platforms is more socially conscious than previous generations, and they're using their platforms to bring about social change in a few different ways. Probably the most popular are public statements, generally through social media, that shine a light on issues of injustice. This basketball student athlete initially posted this video on TikTok and then on Twitter just last month, calling out the NCAA for a lack of equity in equipment provided for the men's and women's Final Four championships.
I got something to show y'all. So for the NCAA March Madness, the biggest tournament in college basketball for women, this is our weight room. Let me show y'all the men's weight room. Now, when pictures of our weight room got released versus the men's, the NCAA came out with a statement saying that it wasn't money, it was space that was a problem. Let me show y'all something else. Here's our practice court, right? And then here's that weight room. And then here's all this extra space. If you aren't upset about this problem, then you're a part of it.
This video went viral and it was viewed almost 14 million times. It triggered a national response, rapid corrective action, and further reviews on gender equity in NCAA championship events. Other ways that we see athletes taking part in this movement include wearing special apparel with messages and decals. For example, this UCLA basketball jersey or this Syracuse University football jersey. Also, we see collective action, which includes protest marches, linking arms during the national anthem, other types of support for teammates in their own advocacy causes, as well as community outreach programs, voting campaigns, participating in ride-alongs with local police or visiting local schools or hospitals. The question then becomes how to move from protest to policy. How can university sport engage and what types of support do students need? Social justice activism at the organizational level requires leadership and moral courage. Moral courage allows the league or the federation to stand behind actions for moral reasons, even when the outcome is unknown or it appears to be negative. It's the strength to stand on the right side of an issue despite potential negative ramifications. In 2005, the NCAA took a stand on the use of stereotypical sport mascots and images of indigenous people at NCAA championship events. Now, at the time, the decision was derided by many as political correctness, and it was an overreach on the part of the governing body. However, the NCAA stayed the course, and now almost 20 years later, we have begun to see substantive change in the professional sport world, with the Washington football team and the Cleveland baseball team making a change and moving away from their indigenous images. An organization finds the moral courage to tackle these issues through its culture and through its values. Most organizations, and certainly most sport organizations, tout diversity, inclusiveness, equity, sportsmanship, and other ideals as core to their collective belief system. These values form the basis for corporate social responsibility and social activism. Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Education is key to the goal of developing a consistent baseline knowledge and understanding with all of us operating from a similar prism. We all have a responsibility to increase our knowledge exponentially, to understand history, and how it contributes to current social dynamics. A commitment to broad-based ongoing education around these topics will clear the path for greater understanding and support of these issues that for some may not have a personal impact. So how can universities engage? Well, when asked through the NCA study what university sport programs can do, these are some of the points that were raised by student athletes and students. First, listen to students, listen to their voices, listen and be open to new ideas. Create opportunities for student athletes and coaches to talk to each other about these issues. Demonstrate support for students and student athletes. Stand with student athletes on these issues, openly supporting the movement. Take action through hosting educational sessions and honest conversations. Educate coaches and administrators so they can help to facilitate these conversations. Create events, discussions, sport-related projects that focus on today's social climate and contribute to starting the conversation. And take a public stance with your statements, your actions, your social media content that promote civic engagement and social and racial justice. You know, I believe we really are at a tipping point. This is one of my favorite authors, Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about the definition of a tipping point, when an idea or a social behavior crosses some threshold and spreads. I believe we are at a period in history where what we do now can determine whether we actually see systemic change. This moment demands that we act. It demands that we work together to build global community and trust, that we have the strength and the courage to be vulnerable around these issues, to show up and to be seen. In the words of Cesar Chavez, once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. Racism and social injustice in all its forms must be eradicated from our society, and sport as a social institution, one that is uniquely positioned and universally embraced, can help to change the world. The power of sport is seen not only in its ability to bring people from varying backgrounds together, but in its inherent significance and influence in our culture and our society. And university sport has a role to play. I'll close with one of my favorite quotes. It is from a speech given by Bobby Kennedy to members of the National Union of South African Students on June 6, 1966, Day of Reaffirmation. Each time a person stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, these ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Dr. An, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Omili. I appreciate your knowledge and inspiring messages and video clips. Now it is our time to have panel discussion, and as you notice, our time is kind of limited. So I would like to go around the panel to ask one question per person. Mr. Claude, we'd like to ask a question. You mentioned that sports activities are the only educational opportunities for refugee camps. What type of educational help can the FISU and WT provide as an extension of maximizing educational opportunities?
I'm afraid I missed a lot of the question. Do you mind repeating it?
Oh yeah,
sure. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned that sports activities are only educational opportunities for youth refugees. So what types of educational help?
That's, yeah. If that's what I said, then I said it incorrectly. Sports, okay. You're thinking that I said sports are the only education opportunity. Is that what you think I said? It's
Yeah, I probably misheard, so you
okay.
can restate it.
No. We have, unfortunately, in refugee camps, education only goes through the age of 12. And it's usually the education system of the country where the refugee is located, where the camp is located. And from 12 on, as you know, secondary education is not finished, which, by the way, makes for a big problem, because if you've got teenagers who are not in school, you can imagine what teenagers who are not in school and not occupied in some thoughtful manner are going to get in trouble. And it turns out when they get into sports, the sports becomes part of their education. So it's a substitute. And there's no way that we can get around it because it's a lack of money. That's what the problem is.
Thank you. And I have another question for Professor Millie. You share a lot of knowledge and you have experience and inspiring messages. So what type of policies and positions should FISU relating to sports and social justice?
Right. So it's quite interesting, Dr. An, because as I mentioned, we're all coming from different places in terms of how we approach these issues. And there are laws and social mores in various countries that impact how people speak out about certain topics. But within the context of those national laws and those social customs, I think that university federations need to consider creating some guidelines that help student athletes understand how they can express themselves in a positive and productive manner. Now, from the FISU level, the governing body level, it might help for us to think about a corporate social responsibility statement around some of these issues. This generally means that individuals and companies have a duty to act in the best interest of their environment or in their society as a whole. And we need to define this for ourselves as FISU, as an entity, and figure out what our role will be in the global community and how FISU will create a legacy of change. The other important part I think that we need to think about as activism increases among athletes and among university athletes in particular is what kind of guidelines will be put in place around FISU events to allow student athletes to be able to express themselves in positive ways. Now we know the IOC at their Rule 50, which has been discussed many times over the years. And from our side here, the USOPC has put forth some recommendations requesting that the IOC loosen up some of those restrictions around what athletes can do. So, but to my knowledge, I do not think that FISU has engaged in a conversation around this, and the time may be now to do this, to start talking about what we allow during FISU events. I would also say further engagement with our student body around these topics. Our forums, FISU forums, generally have a broad, wide breadth of topics, and we've covered many diversity inclusion related topics, and I think social justice and social activism could also be a topic for coming group discussions or seminars or our student committee. And then, more partnerships, similar to the one with the World Taekwondo Association, where we can continue to advance these positive messages throughout our global community.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. And when I was a college student back in Korea a long time ago, we participated in a lot of activism and the demonstration, because what we learned from school and what we actually experienced from the society and government was quite different. So we could initiate a lot of conversations and the educational forum similar to this one, or collaborations with different federations will be very helpful and beneficial. Now, Professor, thank you. Professor Rosara. Do you have interpreter available? I heard that she has technical challenges.
I don't know exactly. she contacted me. She don't have the possibility to contact our she don't have the possibility join with us.
Okay, all right. So what is the biggest achievement of FISU Gender Equality Committee since its inception?
For me, the big problem now is not
Achievement,
well,
big achievement.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, I know. For me, the achievement is the work from a national organization to from national organization to FISU. FISU can work from FISU from umbrella FISU. We can support all organizations, but we need the all organization work about the gender equality in your organization, not only FISU, not only gender equality committee, because we need we need the all national organization have the gender equality, have the perspective gender equality in their organization.
Thank you. That's a very important point. From National University Sports Federation should actively engage in the gender balance and equality. And I'm circling back to Mr. Claude. We have a lot of young athletes in our FISU as well as WT. What would you recommend them as an individual to be part of this activities or help those who are underserved or even possibly those in the refugee camp?
Well, none of it is easy, but the best way for athletes who are in a developed country to help a refugee situation is the integration of the refugees that come to the country where they are. All these refugees need an open arm in a way that Delise has talked about with justice and racial justice. They need to feel that they are somewhat welcome, and I think a refugee athlete doesn't have to be a peak athlete, but a refugee who practices a sport should somehow be in contact with the same sport practitioners in the country and say, come and practice your sport with us. We welcome you. I think that would make an enormous difference. Even outside of what kind of a structure a government would try to have. And by the way, that's obviously the flavor of the day with governments in first world countries when they have refugee population like Germany did with their million coming across the Mediterranean into Germany, through the various countries into Germany. The question becomes, how do you integrate them? And I tell you, sport it may not be a cure-all, but it's a very, very good tool to do just that.
Yes, thank you for your opinion. I believe that sports is very powerful. It's bringing people together and share and genuine human relationship. That's a great starting point to communicate effectively each other. Professor O'Malley, I would like to ask one more question. And what future global trend do you anticipate in sports and the social justice?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting because this technology explosion that we've seen, I think will continue. Social media and technology will continue to increase the power of the individual and as well as collective voices. It goes both ways though. You have an ability to express yourself from wherever you are, as we saw that young lady with the video and the reaction that she got, but it also increases the impact of hatred and negativity and bullying because of the anonymity of it. So I think we will continue to see that. We will continue to see more people speaking out, but we'll also see increased negativity there. Another thing that I've noticed, and I've got kids in this Generation Z age, I know you do as well, and Generation Z has a completely different perspective on some of these topics than Generation X, people in my generation, people in the generations before us. They're very much more open to conversations, and they are more willing to engage in these topics and really put themselves out there. So as Generation Z gets into the university system, I think they're there already, freshmen and sophomores in college already, you're going to see increased interest in activism around that. I think also, at least in the short term, we'll continue to see huge political divides on these issues. In the US, of course, a lot of these issues are just right along the political lines. And I think we see that globally as well. But we also see, a change coming, I believe. We see an energy from, the new generation and just people finally kind of stepping up and saying things that they've wanted to say, but maybe were not courageous enough to say. And then just in terms of topics, I think we'll continue to see increased interest in climate change and issues around sustainability, global sustainability for our world.
Thank you. I appreciate your insight. Professor Mendes, I have one more question for you. What are the future steps of achieving gender equality in university sports? What's the future step?
Yeah, I speak Spanish. FISU ha desarrollado una propuesta sobre los diferentes temas de igualdad de género en los últimos años. Tenemos grandes desafíos. Hemos logrado, como todas las organizaciones nacionales y todas las organizaciones deportivas internacionales, lograr la participación equitativa en el rango o en el nivel de las mujeres. Uno de los grandes desafíos y tareas que tenemos pendientes es lograr que más mujeres se incorporen en los puestos de toma de decisiones. Si más mujeres logramos ubicarnos en los puestos de toma de decisiones, si logramos desarrollar diferentes propuestas de mentorías en las organizaciones nacionales, lógicamente lograremos que las decisiones y las acciones que tomen nuestras organizaciones sean con perspectiva de género. Gracias.
Okay, we have a lot of audience doesn't understand Spanish. Can you summarize briefly in English?
For me, the next step is work for the more position in the leaders in the leadership in FISU. Is our challenge in this moment. We have the 48% in sport participation, but in the leadership we have not more people, 28 people we have in the executive committee, and the other committee, the technical committee, we don't have more 20 or 40 women in different positions. We did work in the next year for the new program, for the mentoring program for women, for For what? Because we need the national organization in the next year, in the next assembly, in the next executive committee election, will present the more women for the leaders position.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. We need a gender balance.
It's the big problem in this moment. Not for the executive committee, it's for the national organization. We need the national organization work with women in the national organization.
Thank you. That's a great point. Well, now our time is up, so I would like to close with a few remarks. First of all, thank you very much for your attention and patience. We had a little bit of technical hiccups, but appreciate your active participation. I believe that both WT and FISU will continue to make various contributions and endeavors to the underserved community and refugee camp with university sports and Taekwondo as a main educational tool to provide visions and hopes for the future. Moreover, we understand how university sports can actively engage social justice and gender equality movements. Leadership scholar Bill Gray said, one of the most powerful things we can do to change the world is change our mind about the world. I hope this forum gives some insights into what we can do to help those who are deserving and underprivileged through university sports. It will be a great, rewarding experience to be able to help and share kindness to others through university sports. I hope to invite all of you to our next educational events in the future. We'll continue to make tireless endeavors to achieve world peace and harmony through university sports and Taekwondo. Please note that a recorded version of today's forum will be available on both FISU and WT website, as well as the social media. And I believe if you're registered, you should receive certificates from Federation. Again, thank you so much for your attention and active participation. I greatly appreciate. And all the president of WT and FISU and acting president, as well as all the wonderful main speakers. I greatly appreciate all your help. And then friends from WT and FISU offices, they were working behind the scene diligently, and they made this event possible. Again, thank you very much. Hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.